Hey everyone, it's Matt. I am unraveling the mystery of Guatemalan coffee today and giving away a bag of Coffea Rosterie coffee. Don't go anywhere. Last time on City Boy, we visited the Atitlan region and farmer Javier Cabrera. After winning 6th place in Guatemala's life-changing Cup of Excellence competition, he expressed his gratitude to a farm in Huehuetenango.
You're going to be in Huehue, right?
Yes.
You're going to El Injerto. Don Arturo came here and he told me, no, you know what, you should do this and this and that. So I did basically everything he told me to do.
Huehuetenango is a department in Guatemala's western highlands that's home to mountains, Mayan ruins, and some of the world's best coffee. There's also a city called Huehuetenango, but El Puerto is located quite far from it. I traveled a couple of hours by chicken bus and then in the back of a pickup truck to get there, but it was definitely worth it. There were so many reasons I wanted to go to El Puerto. If you've been watching the show for a while, you've seen their coffee plants and some of their milk, but you may not know that they placed in the Cup of Excellence competition 9 times. And when I found out how much they helped Javier, it made me even more eager to meet Don Arturo and find out what they were doing to produce such excellent coffee. Don Arturo was incredibly giving with his time, which is one of the reasons that I'm able to keep showing you footage of their farm. I saw some of the things that he shared with Javier, including the ventilation system I showed you last episode that prolongs fermentation. Just like Javier's, the fermenting coffee smelled of sweet fruit. Don Arturo is incredibly attentive to details, and he tells me that though they are large, quality, not quantity, drives each and every one of their decisions. And because they are larger, he's able to employ people to help him oversee different aspects of their production. Rogelio, El Puerto's fermentation manager, was able to tell me about double fermentations, something else Don Arturo shared with Javier. This involves leaving cherries to dry in the sun for a day or two before they are put into a fermentation tank. What made El Puerto start doing double fermentation? It started here. Yeah. You guys were the first. Yes. Later, we cup coffees, and I'm able to try the double fermented coffee, which was a special order for a Saudi Arabian company. It has an interesting wine-like quality to it. Don Arturo also sneaks a popular Guatemalan commodity coffee onto the table. While I try to be kind and say that it smells like chocolate, he makes his feelings crystal clear. Don Arturo has strong opinions and isn't afraid to share them. And he's got every right to be opinionated. He tells me they've put significant resources into researching innovative cultivation techniques, like double fermentation. Technology aside, Don Arturo seems to be personally offended by anyone who's selling substandard coffee to the public. He shows me a calendar on the wall that features a Brazilian farm, then talks about them as if they've been drowning puppies. Their crime? They pick their coffee with machines. Sacrilege. And something you won't find in Guatemala. While it's true El Puerto regularly produces some of Guatemala's best coffee, it's also true that Guatemala produces some of the world's best coffee. Why? That's what we're talking about on today's City Boy. Even today, several months later, I still remember how excited I was on February 18th. I was in Guatemala City, and that was the day I was going to meet with Anacafe. What? You don't know who Anacafe is? Okay, well, I'm gonna have my friend Miguel explain that for us.
Anacafe is an institution that is the one that manages any affairs that the coffee industry in Guatemala has to deal with.
Miguel was the former president of Anacafe, and he and his family operate 2 farms, one in Antigua and one in Acatenango.
It's been almost 60 years now that it was created, and the institution is, I think it's one of the leading institutions of coffee in the world. producing countries. It does not buy or sell coffee, so it's not biased, and it merely focuses on improving production, pest control, and giving the right tools to the producers.
So, as I was saying, when I showed up, I was excited. I had tons of questions, but mostly I wanted to know why Guatemalan coffee has such a strong international reputation. After all, it was that reputation that made me visit Guatemala to learn about coffee. I got to take a tour of the facilities and sit down with Ana, the marketing and communications manager. We talked about how the land is well suited for growing coffee.
We have very good soils in Guatemala with a lot of nutrients. Given the volcanoes and the activity that these volcanoes have.
She made me aware of the many services Anacafe offers their farmers and explained the importance of coffee to Guatemala from an economic perspective.
We're always shifting with banana, sugar, cardamom, and we're usually in the first, second, or third place regarding the generation of income. Coffee as an industry generates over 500,000 jobs every year.
And then, just as Don Arturo had, Ana compared Guatemala to Brazil. Which makes sense. As you can see from her figures, there is an awful lot of coffee in Brazil.
What you see here is, of course, you have Brazil and Vietnam in your top leading exporting countries, but they're basically focused in Robusta. Brazil has a little bit of Arabica, but Brazil also has, well, the land extension is very huge, and they have a lot of mechanical picking, so that makes them very, very efficient as of how they pick their coffee. But they're efficient, but that kind of affects the quality.
There's a reason everyone keeps mentioning Brazil. Guatemala will never be able to compete with the volume of coffee coming out of Brazil. So back in the 90s, Anacafe made a bold choice to focus on quality over quantity.
The production has not increased, it has kind of maintained. But if you look 30 years ago into the Guatemalan exports, most of the coffee, I would say 80% of the coffee was lower grade coffee, which was grown in the coastal or upper coastal zones. And that was primes, extra primes, hard beans, and barely about 12% was, or 10 or 15% was strictly hard bean coffees. Today, if you look into the production and exports, about 80% of the coffee exported from Guatemala is strictly hard beans.
Let's back up for a second because that's a lot of jargon. Guatemala classifies its coffee by altitude because altitude usually has a pretty significant effect on coffee flavors. Coffee plants at lower altitudes in places like, well, Brazil, grow faster, but the flavors are less complex. At higher altitudes, plants have to work harder to grow, and that creates additional acids, which usually create complex flavor notes and a sweeter tasting coffee. So what Miguel is saying is now over 80% of Guatemala's coffee is produced at high altitudes. And as Ana explains, that's not a coincidence.
In the 90s, coffee producers started seeing that we could get a better price for the coffee if we harvest specialized. And in order to get specialized coffee, we needed to move the coffee from the lowlands to the highlands.
So there's a strategy there, right? We don't have as much land as Brazil does, so let's produce better coffee than they do. And when production moved to the mountains, it brought with it built-in quality control.
98% of our coffee gets hand-picked. You've seen our lands, you've seen the mountains. It's basically impossible to get a machine type of, to pick the coffee. And this actually is what generates jobs.
So Guatemala doesn't have a monopoly on higher altitudes. Countries like Colombia and Ethiopia and even Brazil have access to higher altitudes. So Anacafe took it one step further and started thinking about coffee in a new way.
I visited this place one time in Japan named Mikafeto, and this guy it's amazing. He flies the coffee in a refrigerated container, controlled atmosphere, because he buys only amazing coffee from a seller in Antigua. And when you go there, he has this like a humidor where you would put cigars into it. And his clients are top VIP people in Japan, and they buy a pound of this, a pound of that, and they even call him. It's like, tomorrow I have a dinner and I'm serving this. Which of my coffees do you think I should be pairing with my food? And he roasts just half a pound or 2 pounds of the coffee, and he even puts like his special edition coffee in champagne bottles. It's amazing. That's where I say coffee is more than wine than it is to rubber, which is a commodity.
You might remember last episode, I compared coffee to wine. But unlike wine, the price of coffee depends on a publicly traded coffee exchange called the C market.
If the C market is at $1.20, you pay $1.20 and you might get a container of great Guatemalan coffee, or you might get a container of Brazilian coffee, which is at best a hard bean, for example.
I'm honestly starting to feel bad for Brazil.
In wine, there's people willing to pay $100 per bottle, but there's also people that would want to get a Tetra Pak wine by a gallon and pay $8.
So Guatemala started treating coffee more like wine.
Anacafe as an association created Guatemalan Coffees as a brand. And as an association, we also saw an opportunity and we started working in the regionalization of coffees. This is something that Guatemala as an origin country was the pioneer. We were the first origin country to regionalize the coffee for its cup profile.
They divided the coffee into 8 regions: Huehuetenango, Coban, Atitlan, Acatenango, Antigua, Fraijanes, Nuevo Oriente, and San Marcos. And it differentiated those coffees by the cup profile. So, even though you can produce with a certain variety like Caturra in Antigua, and in Acatenango, and in Atitlan, those 3 varieties will taste totally different because of the microclimates of those places.
On an upcoming episode, I'm going to be tasting and describing Guatemalan coffee from different regions. But if you don't drink a lot of coffee, you might be surprised to know that location really does affect flavor. But this is essentially what you see in wine. And while the rest of the coffee growing world has caught up, including a certain country that shall not be named, by getting there first, Guatemala essentially created demand for their high quality coffees.
People come to Guatemala and they want to purchase Antigua coffee, and they already know that they're going to have to pay a premium price because there's only a certain amount of farms in the Antigua region, and if they don't buy it, somebody else will at that same price.
Anacafe's mission to pursue quality shows up in their services too. On my tour, I observed a class where students learned cupping, roasting, and brewing. The organization also evaluates coffee for farmers, helping them to identify defects and flavor characteristics, which will help them improve their crop and market to potential buyers. And all of this focus on quality has helped Guatemala get a base coffee price that's slightly higher than the standard C market price.
Yeah, they use the C market price as a reference, but then Guatemalan coffees gets to up to 30 or 50 plus as a differential from the C price.
This isn't necessarily as rosy as it sounds. The increased quality means that Guatemalan coffee is also more expensive to produce, but they've definitely found a way to differentiate themselves on the world stage.
Producer association, work together and actually see that there was a big opportunity in making a difference in our coffees through having specialty coffee and not volume precisely, because we don't have the land, as I mentioned before, as for example Brazil, in order to get a lot of volume, but we can assure that the volume that we do export is an excellent cup of coffee.
Several people have told me that Anacafe is one of the best run organizations of its kind, and it's really evident when you see how their work has changed the country. We'll be hearing more from them in upcoming episodes, but for now, it's time to give away a bag of coffee. Today's coffee was roasted by Coffea Rosterie Coffee and from Guatemala's rainforest Coban region. It's a humid area known for the perpetual mist that Guatemalans call chipi chipi.
To enter, leave a comment or subscribe to our Patreon. Details below. Oh, and many thanks to my friends in Brazil. I look forward to exploring your fine coffee someday as well.
Coming up on City Boy, does coffee affect the environment? What's Guatemala's coffee culture like? How do Ethiopia's best coffees taste? And how hard could it possibly be to climb a volcano?